All right, so let's start the hour with this story. So the Border Management Authority is expecting the number of travellers at various ports of entry to return to pre-coronavirus levels this festive season. Extra staff will help man the various border posts as the BMA says it's ready for an influx of travellers. BMA Commissioner Michael Masiapato joins us for an update. Commissioner, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with this post, some of the positives here. When we say that we might see travel go back to what it was pre-COVID-19, hopefully that would mean good traffic coming into the country, tourism, and I imagine that that's something that has been a consideration for you as well.
Yes, no, thank you very much, Naledi. We appreciate the opportunity. Yes, indeed, we are very much, excited that indeed we are to be recovering to the pre-COVID numbers. So in terms of our projections, based on the previous data, for instance, just in 22-23, we recovered after COVID to around 4 million. And then just last year, 23-24, we were sitting at 5 million. We are very much hopeful that this time around we will be sitting at around 6 million, which is fairly the baseline for the pre-COVID numbers. Yes, indeed, it will be good news because it will mean increase in terms of tourism in the country, and that obviously will mean more economic activity, and of course that will turn into employment opportunities, and of course the economy will then be revived as we go forward.
That's the positives, right? When we say, okay, the right kind of traffic finding its way in, a traffic that says, all right, economic stimulation, they want to enjoy South Africa, and the paperwork is all in the right place. But you've shared some significant numbers today around having stopped over 400,000 individuals attempting to enter the country illegally. And I wonder if, I mean, this is since the deployment of the border guards in 2022, I wonder if that number could be higher.
Yeah, that is the number in terms of those that we had been able to intercept, Naledi, and that actually cuts across all our three modalities in terms of the ports, that is airport, land ports, as well as seaports. The majority of those were fairly intercepted on the land ports, particularly on our borderline with Zimbabwe, followed by the borderline with Mozambique, and then followed by the one with Lesotho, as it were. So indeed, that is basically the numbers for those that we've been able to intercept. But we do know that there will be a lot number that we have actually missed. And up to this point, we are not able to account for those that we are not able to intercept, primarily because we do not have the technology as yet to be able to ensure the overall surveillance, especially of the vulnerable segments on the borderline, so that we can be able to fully account for those that we might not be able to intercept. So we don't have the other number.
Yeah, and then just as we talk about who's coming into the country illegally, I'm again reminded of some of the images that we beamed last week of miners surfacing from Stilfontein. Some of those miners being minors with an O, so people that are underage. And I immediately think about at our very own borders, seeing buses and reports of buses that were filled with children that were for the most part unaccompanied and didn't have documentation. Is that a concern and something that you'll be looking out for as we get closer to the festive season?
Yes, Naledi, that is one of the critical issues. That is why, even in terms of the statement that we have issued today, we did indicate that we have firmed up our relationship with the Department of Social Development. They will also be sending officials on the ground, particularly in our busiest land ports in particular, to be able to be on the lookout for those incidences of possible trafficking or even of the possible smugglings, as it were. So those are the issues that we look at very closely, and we are to ensure that indeed our ports are not going to be exploited and actually be used for those kind of activities. So over time, we have been making sure that we intensified our efforts, particularly in terms of ensuring that children are actually not trafficked through our ports. During the course of the past festive period, we did have the officials on the ground from the Department of Social Development. Even during festive period, I mean the April period, we were in Groblersdal Bridge with them, And we had been able to do some of those interceptions, and we handed them over to the departments to be able to provide psychosocial support. But going into the future, Naledi, we are expected as the BMA to also have the first line in terms of the social workers within the BMA to be able to do the initial psychosocial support before handing over to the Department of Social Development.
Yeah, I've got so many questions for you, to be quite honest with you, because where, you know, those numbers, and you say we're able to identify where things have gone wrong, the 400,000 individuals attempting to enter the country legally, where you may not be able to catch them out is where you have your own officials working with them. I mean, I don't know what time frame you'd like to look at, but how many officials you've taken off the roll and even had criminal charges against them?
Yeah, you see, Naledi, the issue of corruption, particularly for officials, it is something that we take very seriously as the BMA. Since we took over, we are talking about zero tolerance in terms of corruption within the BMA. Just in the past 6 months, which is basically the first and the second quarter of the current financial year, we have been able to deal with over 50 plus officials. In the statement, we do indicate that we have 3 as we speak that are on precautionary suspension. We have 7 that had already been dismissed as we speak, but we are sitting with around 43 that are currently going through disciplinary processes, which are at various stages, as it were. Yeah. So that is one thing that we are very much serious on. We have also forged a partnership with the Special Investigative Unit, and we established what is called the Border Management and Immigration Anti-Corruption Forum. The intention of that is to be proactive, particularly in terms of educating our officials to make sure that they understand that the whole issue of corrupt activities are actually going to be affected very seriously, and people are going to be losing their jobs. The other partnership that we have created, for instance, and a lady is with the Department of Correctional Services, where we actually request some of the officials who used to work in these particular spaces, who are currently behind bars, to be able to go to the ports and actually talk to our officials in terms of actually telling them that it is not good for them to do any corrupt tendencies, because they will be ending up in those overalls.
Then this story, shocks us and breaks the hearts of so many South Africans once again. A primary school learner in Riverlea loses his life today after consuming biscuits from a local spaza shop. Just moments ago, we were in conversation with Vincent Magwenya, spokesperson to the president, who talked about your efforts to, I suppose, crack down on some of these pesticides, organophosphate, that are making their way into the country. At the border, do we know what we're looking for?
Yeah, you see, Naledi, firstly, we do agree that there is this challenge of food contamination. We are part of the JCPS cluster, that is the security cluster. We have been part of the discussions in as far as this part is concerned. So as we speak now, Naledi, there is no a complete scientific evidence indicating that indeed this is important. However, because there are those that are actually producing this internally and they are actually using them for agricultural purposes. At the same time, we do have aldicap, which is fairly banned in the country, as it were, and therefore not necessarily in a way produced in the legal context in the country. And that is why there is this reality that some of this might actually be illegally imported into the country. So what we then had to do was to ensure that all our agricultural biosecurity experts as well as environmental biosecurity experts deployed at the ports of entry are actually at high alert to be able to pick them up. So what does that mean? What it means is we then had to have a conversation with the experts for them to be able to ensure that our officials are brought through in terms of understanding the packaging of this, how they look physically, and all of those kind of issues, including the tactics that the people might use in terms of hiding them as they try to bring them into the country. So those are the kind of efforts that we put on the table. But of course, as you will know, Naledi, up to this point, because of the resourcing of the space, we don't necessarily have complicated or sophisticated scanners to be able to just easily pick up these things. So currently, we are still using just basic observations to be able to pick them up. Hence, we have upped our effort, and therefore we should be able to pick them up when the people try to bring them into the country illegally.
But that's concerning, right? Where we've got a crisis that we've already gone as far as to say, all right, this food poisoning issue is now, it can be declared a disaster. And there's that admission that, you know, our biosecurity experts simply don't have the infrastructure that they need. So who then is failing, you know, border management in ensuring that you do have the resources, particularly the technology that's necessary?
Yeah, you see, Naledi, this is one of those issues that I suppose with some of these challenges that are very much in the face of South Africans, we should be able as a country to start investing in this particular space. I think one thing that we can fairly agree is that over the past few years, as it were, there has not necessarily been that much investment in the space. Now, we came in as the Border Management Authority to be able to start doing this work a bit differently, and therefore there is a need for some bit of injection in the space to enable us to be able to do this work as it is supposed to be done.
Yeah.
So I suppose on that basis, we can agree that we have done our, you know, our submissions of the relevant business cases to the relevant authorities, that is including Treasury, and therefore I suppose we should be able to get something out of it. The intention is to be able to make sure that we do have these technologies to be able to deal with these issues as it were.
Yeah, I'm going to let you go, but I think it would be wrong of me to let you go without checking on the latest coming out of the Lebombo border post, where, you know, we've seen opening of the border post, closing of the border post, and back and forth, depending on the situation within Mozambique, with those protests, those post-election protests and unrest that has been taking place in Mozambique. How would you describe the situation at that border post?
Yeah, so what basically is the case there, Naledi, as I spoke to the port commander just quite recently, they did indicate that the situation is quite stable. During the weekend, we were able to do the processing of both travelers as well as cargo. There hasn't been issues, and the whole day today, again, there hasn't been any issues. But just in the past 10 minutes, I just received an indication that the leader of the opposition that side had indicated that they are intending to start on Wednesday, on the 4th. And on that basis, we are monitoring the situation very closely. And indeed, if they start, we will then continually be, you know, guided by the Mozambicans. We don't close the port per se. What we basically do is just we suspend processing given the situation. Once it stabilizes, we resume the activities as it were.
Okay, and you'll keep us updated, of course, as those developments do come forward. Commissioner, we really do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us after what has obviously been a very busy day as well. Commissioner Michael Masiapato there of the Border Management Authority speaking to us here on Newsfeed PM, the late edition with myself, Naledi Mula. More news after this short break. Stay with us.